Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sascha Fahrbach. 12 countries from the Baltic to the Balkans have endorsed closer cooperation with the United States on LNG supply, signaling a practical step in regional energy diversification. Developments echo earlier infrastructure ambitions behind the so-called 3Cs initiative. Now, to understand what it all means, we're joined by Sławomir Raszewski, Senior Oil and Gas Lecturer at the University of London. Good to have you back on TVP World.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So I want to begin with this declaration. These 12 countries signed this declaration just this week. What, in your perspective, from an energy market here, what's practically new here? Will this now signal more terminals, more ships, more supplies? What's practically going to happen as an impact due to this?
Yes, the practical element here is clearly that we're going back to the 3Cs initiative, something that we discussed in the past, something that has been on the agenda, but if you like, for quite some time has been put on the back burner, and that's largely because of the climate policy objectives with the European Union. Now the circumstances have changed and there's a greater focus on energy security. So we've moved away from the climate policy focus towards energy security, and indeed the 3Cs initiatives comes back to the focus. So why 3Cs initiative is important? Because, you know, we cannot diversify away from the traditional suppliers in Central and Eastern Europe without interconnections, without interconnecting the north, the Baltic Sea, with the south, with them. So this is very important, and this is largely because of this shift towards energy security.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the 3Cs initiative. I mean, this is also considered a political project for a long time. I just want to look at this practically. Is this now this sort of blueprint? Will this now go forward, you see? Because we've talked about it in the past, and there were some tangibles missing. So I'm just wondering if you see now this is a moment where practically these things are going. You mentioned the European Union. Is that going to work in tandem with all this?
I think from the market point of view and also from the macro point of view, it is already happening. The conflict in Ukraine has galvanized energy security in this part of the world. If you look at the supply of natural gas, Russia used to be the dominant supplier of natural gas. Back in 2021, 40 BCM of natural gas supplied from Russia. Now today, it's 40% of natural gas supplies from Russia. Now it's down to 12 to 13% of natural gas altogether, with most of it being LNG. Natural gas supply by pipelines dropped down to below 2 digits. So in other words, it's already happening because US is now the major supplier of natural gas. So the biggest supplier of LNG to Europe is currently US. So I think it's already happening. What is likely to continue is probably the expansion of the capacities. So expansion of the capacity of key terminals. And that's why if you look at the statements from the representatives of Poland and Croatia, most notably, there's a great push for more infrastructure investment, and that's largely because these two countries host important LNG receiving terminals, and of course these two countries are important in this context.
Yeah, and you mentioned Croatia and Poland. I want to get a little bit more specific on that. There has been a lot of deliveries. I think Croatia in particular has been expanding that. I think it's around over 6.1, I believe, billion cubic meters per year. You mentioned Poland as well. So is this now, are they, let's say, carrying enough capacity for their own markets? Are they now these regional distributors? Tell us a bit more about their, let's say, integral role here to both sides of this, the north-south side.
I think we need to look at the macro perspective. If you look at the US energy representative who spoke recently at the International Energy Agency conference, he said that natural gas is the fuel, and natural gas is the fuel of choice, or should be the fuel of choice in this part of the world. And I think that in the situation we are at the moment, there is a lot of politics involved here. And indeed, the US has been supporting if you like, greater consumption of LNG in Central and Eastern Europe. And I think that politically, this is largely already happening, and it's probably going to be more on the agenda. So what it means in practice, doesn't mean that at the moment we have enough capacity for this part of the world. No, we don't, because most of the capacity is actually in Western Europe. But the problem here is also political, because we know that the Western Europe, even though they have cut the imports of natural gas, there's still ongoing trades in LNG with Russia. So in the background of this discussion, there's obviously Russian gas supplies. Central and Eastern Europe is more wary of supplies from Russia. It wants to diversify away from Russia, whereas the Western Europe is largely still importing natural gas via LNG from Russia. So we cannot sort of discredit this element of diversifying away from Russia. And of course, that's largely to do with the broader, if you like, objectives of weakening the economy, and also making sure that the sanctions work, because that's something that we have been discussing with you over the past year or 2 years now, how to operationalize the sanction. I think that if US and its allies are serious about that, then probably these initiatives aimed at diversifying away from Russia, aimed at bringing in more natural gas from the US, are probably going to continue to materialize.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and talk about diversification. Let's bring in an interesting scenario here in a case study with Serbia, for instance. I mean, at the same time, they're also in the middle of all this, important player. They've now apparently renewed contracts with Russia. That may not be a surprise, but at the same time, they're talking with the United States. So is this a contradiction? Are they just hedging their bets, or how do you take Serbia's role in all this?
Well, I don't think this is a contradiction. Serbia has been kind of trying to be in between. They are in between, and they have European aspirations, but at the same time, they understand the geographical location. Because of favorable geographical location, right next to Croatia, I think that Serbia cannot just put all the eggs into one basket. It's not the case of Slovakia and Hungary, if you like, which indeed in the past few years have been unable to diversify away from traditional sources of supply. So I think Serbia is going to continue to play this role of both, importing from Russia, but at the same time looking for new supply options. Now, is this the same about Slovakia and Hungary? I'm not sure.
Yeah, and on that, you said that Slovakia and Hungary have been unable, in your words, to diversify, or maybe some might say perhaps unwilling. If we look at that a little bit more, that argument especially being used by Viktor Orban now, that the pricing of imports, of LNG, etc., other sources is too expensive. Is that an argument that is still persuasive, considering other options available coming from Croatia, for instance?
As we started this conversation, I said that we moved away from climate policy towards energy security. And indeed, when you think of energy security, price is not always the most important factor. Security of supply is the most important factor in energy security context. So if we are, and I believe that we are in this point in time when energy security matters, then probably it's not just about the price. So the argument about the price may not hold. There are other important, points to consider. And of course, being a member of the European Union and being part of an alliance also necessitates to think about supplies from the security point of view. So coming back to your point, yes, price is important, but I think that there are other considerations as well. But I think that overall, there's initiative that is taking place. Should this materialize and should this continue to expand, we're probably going to give arguments to those countries who so far have been pointing those concerns, in other words, offers not to refuse, because there will be more infrastructure and more options for them to be supplied from alternative sources, including from Poland and from Croatia.
Mm-hmm. Right. You mentioned the shadow fleet. I want to come back to it for a moment. There have been more and more sanctions on certain tankers, trying to really hem that down, take away that revenue from Russia. In your mind, since we last talked over the last months, how effective are those measures, and how considerable, let's say, is that to Russia and the Kremlin losing revenue on that income from oil and gas?
Well, this discussion is ongoing, but to be fair, we don't really have a full picture, and we don't have the data to really support our arguments. We know that there is a growing number of cargoes that go unaccounted for. So in other words, there's more and more trade that goes outside of our accounting books. And this is largely because of the offers that are there and discounts that are proposed by those countries that are sanctioned. By the way, it's not only Russia, obviously, it's also Iran. And this number is growing. That's what the experts are saying. And I think that going forward, we're probably going to see more and more challenges when it comes to environmental security concerning, potential spills and potential, hazards that these trade creates. So coming back to your point, we don't have full data, but we know that the number from various outlets, from various analytical centers, that the number of transactions outside of the normal trade is growing.
Also, we talked about clamping down on the shadow fleet. Poland has been involved in that. Also, an earlier part of the conversation, we talked about this as well. I want to come back to that for a moment because, I want to get your sense, and for our audience too, how much Poland has diversified if we're looking at completely stopping any inflows from Russian oil and gas. And do you see this as a kind of model that now is, let's say, can be replicated with other member states, other countries in Europe? And if the concern there, it's only U.S. LNG, where are the other sources? Where could they come from? Let's talk about that for a moment.
Okay, since we framed this conversation this morning in the context of energy security, we have to remember that Poland is one of those countries that really believes in energy security, and it's been always on the agenda. If you look back to 2010s, energy security is always in the focus of attention. It's not necessarily the same with other nations. So can this model, if you like, be replicated? It has been replicated in Lithuania, our neighboring country, which also treasures energy security. Can this be replicated in other parts of Europe? It depends. Some argue that this should be focused entirely on the supply and demand, that markets should be essentially managing the transactions. But we know that there's a lot of politicization as well in energy trade, and there are certain decisions that sort of defy the logic of the market. So I think it depends how important energy security is for the nation, and on that basis, it is probably going to be replicated in those nations that believe that energy security matters today.
All right, so we're coming to a close here. Just one quick sentence on where we stand in about a year's time now with energy security here in Central and Eastern Europe.
In Central and Eastern Europe, I think that energy security is going to continue to be important, largely because of being so close to the theater of conflict, war, and also because of the historical, if you like, legacy that necessitated moving away from the supplies. Obviously, this creates a new problem, which we might want to talk about next time. What does it mean to diversify away, and whether diversifying away from some sources doesn't create new dependencies? And indeed, it may, and this has been recently voiced by some, particularly in Western Europe, that, moving to supplies from across the pond may create new dependencies.
Right, so interesting discussion there as always. Look, thanks so much for those insights. That was Sławomir Raszewski there from the University of London. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. This concludes World Talks, but stay right here on TVP World for more news and commentary. Goodbye.